Welcome to the latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon's Corner. My name is Paul Thomas, and this evening we are going to be discussing the January 6th Congressional Select Committee's investigation into the January 6th insurrection. With us tonight, Marilee Rendulich, Thaddeus Polhemus, and Daniel Thomas. Welcome, panel. I've been saying for years that the most important issue facing the American body politic is the preservation of our ability to prevent our descent into a totalitarian, authoritarian, fascist dictatorship. The Congressional Select Committee's investigation into the January 6th attempt to overthrow our constitutional government is one of the pillars on which this preservation attempt is based. Is this investigation the most important tool we have, or are there others that we need to rely on? If so, what are they? Dan, is there something more important as far as preserving our democracy than this particular committee and their work?
Well, the committee is not what stopped it from happening in the first place. So, yes, the currently existing systems and institutions are more important, but we never should overlook the fact that they only held because of a very, very few people in key places. Democratic governors in Michigan and Pennsylvania who wouldn't let the election be overturned. Mike Pence actually understanding what his role that day was and not being stupid enough to be convinced to do something otherwise. The system held, but it only held just barely. The Supreme Court refusing. I don't want to say anything real good about SCOTUS right now. They're throwing us into a hellish nightmarescape a little bit more every day. It's so good of them to wait for a break in the mass shootings for 2 days before expanding gun rights. But them refusing to hear the case because it had absolutely no merit and they wanted to preserve their credibility. Those things were what held back the tsunami. The January 6th committee will make recommendations that will die on the Senate floor for how to strengthen those previously existing institutions. But, at least it's all out there in the open, except for the Fox News people who really need to hear it because they're not watching.
Well, Fox did decide that, though, they were going to, after they received all that flack about not showing it, they are televising the hearings, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Well, they at least missed the first couple of days of them. And
right.
Those were the people who definitely needed to hear it.
So you're saying that the institutions that are already in place had more to do with preserving our future democracy than this particular committee?
Yes, because
okay.
This particular committee wouldn't necessarily have even existed. If the coup had worked, it definitely wouldn't exist. And it's not going to exist if Republicans take the House in the fall. So I don't want to hinge all our hopes for survival on something that is so transient. I mean, it makes Liz Cheney look very good, but I don't want to pin too much hope on something that I know is going to fall apart.
Okay, Thaddeus. Dan seems to believe that the institutions were the most important factor so far in preserving, but I'm kind of looking at the future a little bit and what information is coming out of this committee. So what's your view of the most important tool in the box that is going to preserve our democracy?
I was going to say that this committee's work is an important first step, but I'll agree with Daniel that the institutions are going to be crucial. He said they were crucial in just barely keeping us from becoming a dictatorship a year and a half ago. But they're going to have to come back in play to help us get past this and hopefully start to heal. And those two are the Department of Justice and the courts. The Department of Justice, which until recently stayed eerily silent, but we are hearing that they're picking up a lot of information from the gleanings of the committee, and are apparently looking towards developing cases against the principals. And if this comes to fruition and the indictments start flying and people actually get hauled into court and accused and tried for these crimes that they have committed, then we're in the right direction. But the courts are going to have to not only try these people, but people who are manifestly guilty, and that is in the eyes of the whole world, are going to have to be actually sentenced and locked up before the country can start to put itself back together.
Okay. Marilee, these guys made some good points. What's your view on what is most important as far as preserving this democracy?
Well, I'm appreciating the actual scrutiny that is going into all the different efforts that were made to overturn or maintain power by Trump. I think it's rather fascinating how many different avenues he actually took before the actual attempted coup on the Capitol. But, I have to agree with the importance of the Department of Justice, and hopefully some accountability is eventually arrived at for the lead parties. I know that all remains to be seen, but I think that's absolute key. I don't know that we have a system going forward if they don't. But the other thing I think too is the Georgia investigation. That's really has some teeth to it. And I kind of chuckled when they called Graham for trying to issue him a subpoena today, and Giuliani. So, this is more apolitical, with the state of Georgia doing this. And so I think that might also bear some weight in maintaining our institutions.
Yeah, what happened in Georgia was the most encouraging thing I've heard in the news lately. The fact that the subpoenas were issued for Lindsey Graham, John Eastman, Rudy, Jenna Ellis, and that guy Chesbro, who's a new name in it. Okay, after the House managers gave their very effective presentation at Trump's second impeachment trial in the Senate, 57 senators voted to convict. Do you think these public hearings will change any minds from those who might still believe that January 6th wasn't really so bad? Marilee, do you see any minds being changed, or is everybody just locked in?
I think we'd all like to see the Trump cult minds be changed, but I think they're absolutely unequivocally locked in. I just haven't noticed anybody wavering. And the cowardice of some of these participants, like Mark Meadows and Scipione, or however you say his name, everybody just digging in and not willing to speak to the panel. It's horrible. They're developing this whole new pattern of irreverent behavior towards the Constitution, and I have a very negative feeling about awareness, if it's increasing any awareness, except for those who really want the knowledge.
Thaddeus, see any minds being changed?
Well, I'm hanging on to some hopes. And it's actually in light of what you mentioned in your question that 57 senators voted to convict him in the second impeachment. That meant that a bunch of Republicans,
Seven
seven
Republicans, yeah.
actually voted to send him home. And that, these are people who are very, very much invested, as senators, they're very much invested in their politics. Now, when they finally, when Fox News finally started putting the the show on their station, a whole lot more people were going to see it because, if I am correct, Fox News is the most heavily watched news station in the country. So more people were getting this information as it was coming out in the committee. And I'm holding out hope that enough of those people who are looking at this are going to have their minds changed. This is very difficult to do. We're not going to get unanimous agreement that Trump has got to go or anything like that. But I'm hoping that some people, just a sliver of people that are enough to push this over the edge and not have a civil war break out when they clap the cuffs on the former president and march him off to jail.
Well, if a civil war does break out, then we arrest those guys that are perpetrating a civil war and throw their asses in jail. Dan, polls seem to indicate that more people are more inclined to believe that Trump committed a crime and therefore needs to go to jail. Am I more optimistic or about looking at polls, or am I naive if I look at these polls and think that some minds may be being changed somewhat?
Well, justice is not supposed to be about public opinion. So yes, that is naivete on your part. However, if we've got an actual statute that there is sufficient evidence that he violated, and I think that is what is taking the Justice Department such a goddamn long time. But they're all lawyers and legal experts, so they should have figured it out by now. If they're going to come for the king, they had best not miss, because if he gets indicted and goes on trial and he's acquitted, he is going to win in 24 by a landslide. It is absolutely imperative that we have it locked up airtight when Garland goes after him, because he will, whatever technicality he gets off on, he will claim complete vindication. His cult will believe him. The people who are not deeply politically engaged, I think it's safe to say that everyone on this panel and all your panels is extremely partisan. The people who aren't will just see that, oh, he was right. He is being persecuted. He's not just whining, and they will vote for him again because gas prices or something. But if we're going to, we have to, he's an immoral man. He's an evil man. He is ruthless and vindictive, and he campaigned on being an asshole, and he went with it. I believe it was the Fox News contributor who said he's an unrepentant dick, but he's an unrepentant dick for us. And that, combined with a 30-year smear campaign against Hillary Clinton, put that man in the White House, where he tried to fake it till he made it, and it ended badly for everyone involved. But I want to see him published or punished. I was not polled, but my opinion does not matter because I can't point to the evidence in this of crime committed and the specific crime that was committed.
I find myself screaming at the TV a whole lot more these days than I used to in the recent past. My latest gripe, we talked a little bit about this earlier, was with the talking heads, watching them try to figure out why the January 6th committee wasn't fully cooperating with DOJ's request for the transcripts of the depositions in the witnesses of the coup attempt provided to the committee. Not one of the talking heads even mentioned the fact that the full House voted on December 14th, 2021, to refer criminal charges, contempt of Congress for Mark Meadows and later for Dan Scavino and Peter Navarro for refusing to comply with legitimately issued subpoenas. It was announced on June 3rd that Peter Navarro was indicted by DOJ for his criminal contempt, refusing the subpoenas. But Meadows and Scavino, with no explanation, would not be charged with contempt of Congress. If you heard of an explanation, I'd like to hear it, but I didn't see that there was an explanation whenever they came out with that announcement. Mark Meadows was in the middle of every aspect, every meeting, over 2,000 text messages where the conspirators such as Ginny Thomas and Don Jr. and Marjorie Taylor Greene, trying to overthrow the government, hatched their various schemes. Do you see what I see, or are you in agreement with the talking heads that DOJ's failure to file contempt charges against Mark Meadows at all is too insignificant to even bother worth mentioning? Thaddeus, I'm sure you have a very insightful thought about this particular development. Could you please share it with us?
It is this. It remains a puzzle to me. And the only thing I hope is that the other two indictments may eventually come down the road. Because, like you, I have no explanation for why they were not indicted for what they did, especially since more damning evidence against Meadows has arisen in the last couple of weeks.
So you think it's possible that these criminal contempt of Congress indictments may come from Meadows?
Possible. Or if not the original contempt, he's certainly proven himself worthy of arrest and indictment for a number of other things. So yeah, I can see a pair of handcuffs in his future somewhere.
Okay. Marilee, could you envision the possibility that they're not looking at this criminal contempt of Congress indictment by the DOJ because they have way better evidence they're going to get on Mark Meadows? Or what do you think the reason is that he didn't get the indictment for criminal contempt?
I'm with you. I'm clueless. I think I've mentioned in a previous one that, the subpoena was issued. Why are they waiting so long? So I like the thought process. They have something greater coming down the pike. That would be fine. But to answer your question, I don't know why that subpoena was not, why the DOJ did not act on that and file contempt charges. I think they need to show some parity for everybody.
Yeah, they did Bannon, they did Navarro.
Yeah.
Why not Scavino and Meadows?
Yeah, So I'm with you. I just don't understand it at all.
Okay, Dan, finish up your thoughts on the fact that Mark Meadows hasn't been indicted for contempt of Congress for failing to go to the subpoenas. You have any insight addition to what we said?
Well, I would have no insight as not a congressman or a Justice Department employee, but my wild speculation is that he cut a deal.
Cut a deal with DOJ?
Mm-hmm. Or the committee in some way that is not being published at this time, but that's the only. He wrote a book about how crazy Trump was and how everything happened during the insurrection. Maybe we don't even need him to testify. He's given up most of his evidence, and he published a book about it. But I do think that if they're not going to pursue that contempt of Congress charge, then I suspect that he's already got something in the works to protect him and sell Trump down the river. And then he can move to, I don't know, Bahrain or wherever rich white people go when they're in trouble at home.
Well, he did get $1 million from that $250 million grift of the Trump Defense Fund. So he does have some cash to rely on if he goes to Bahrain or wherever. Okay, there are there were a number of House Republicans, including Leader McCarthy, who received subpoenas from the committee to be deposed under oath. Every one of them were involved in the conspiracy to overturn the results of the election. There were meetings at the White House. Much of that participation is already in the public record. Cassidy Hutchinson testified under oath on national TV that Scott Perry and a long list of other Republican congressmen asked Trump for pardons for their participation in the attempted coup. Will the committee's scrutiny of the details of their involvement have any negative effect on these congressmen politically? Dan, do you think this is going to be a badge of honor they're going to wear into November and get themselves reelected?
Yes, because despite being the two-time popular vote loser, these people see Donald Trump as the people's president, as opposed to the real people's presidents, Al Gore, Hillary Clinton, the other people who won the popular votes. I thought it was Liz Cheney who said that the people were asking for pardons. I didn't think Hutchison testified to that, but I know I
Yes, she did.
all of her
Yes,
speech.
she did. Yep, she
Yeah.
testified. She mentioned it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think the people who you don't ask for pardon unless you know you're doing something wrong. Like that is the very essence of asking forgiveness rather than permission. Because if you ask for permission, you know you're going to be told no because you're organizing a crime. I also think it's insane that these people wrote down as much as they did about attempting to commit a crime. Like it's like a drug dealer using Venmo. Like you're just asking to be caught. But I don't understand the way that these people think. I believe that they believe they're in some kind of existential battle for like Jesus or something, and they will burn everything down if they believe that they are on the right side. They will not compromise. They will rather just end it all than do anything that would make them cause their base to see them as weak.
Yeah, well, isn't their belief in being the right side merely their desire to hold on to power?
I think Dianne Feinstein's belief that she's on the right side is holding on to power. I think Bernie Sanders' belief that he's on the right side is holding on to power. A lot of these people, Marjorie Taylor Greene's like my age. She is a true believer. She believes deep down in her soul that no price is too high for what she is doing. And she makes that very, very clear. So I don't think that it's just holding on to power. I think a lot of the leadership is holding on to power, but I think there's a ton of rank and file legislators who actually think that they are doing the right thing. And Matt Gaetz wants to stay out of jail for that human trafficking that he does.
Yeah, true. Thaddeus, is there going to be any political price for these people who were listed? There's
Well,
a
one
big
could,
gallery screen of them.
one could hope, but I think partisan Republicans will mostly be sticking by their reps. The only thing that remains to be seen is what the individual states have on their books, laws on their books concerning people who have been under indictment, convicted, or incarcerated for their crimes, whether they can still serve in office.
Well, there is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that says that if you participated in a insurrection, that you are not eligible for office. I mean, that's on in the federal Constitution. So, I mean, we would have that. Of course, they tried to get Marjorie Taylor Greene and Madison Cawthorn on that, and Madison Cawthorn just lost his election, and the people prosecuting Marjorie Taylor Greene for that were just so terribly ineffective in the way they did it. Anyway.
Can we go back to Madison Cawthorn for just 1 second and say
sure.
The insurrection was not a bridge too far. The sexual assault allegations were not a bridge too far. His entire college class wrote a letter saying that he was a sexual predator and nobody cared. Talking about the cocaine orgies that the Republicans have, that was when they turned on him. It was not all the horrible things he actually did. It was implying that Republicans might actually be interesting people. That's where they turned on him.
So you're talking about the Republican primary voters down in North Carolina.
And the Republican establishment, they turned on him. They funneled money into his primary opponent, despite Trump's endorsement, because loose lips sink ships, apparently.
Okay. All right, Marilee, any political liabilities for these guys that there were these congressmen who were participating in the insurrection and who were seeking pardons for their participation?
There should be, obviously, but I guess it has to be proven and it has to be taken forth by the DOJ or, as you'd mentioned, the individual states. Other than that, I don't find the election box as being very effective in removing these people based on their activities and their beliefs. It's been actually very ineffective to find out Lauren Boebert and what's her name, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and a whole bevy of them are still, they're winning their primaries. So I just don't understand why they were ever elected in the first place. But that being said, as atrocious as they are, they're continuing on, and nobody is being punished for their activities today.
Okay, they won their primaries, but there's still the November election, which is the one that counts. You think that that'll have any effect on the November election at all, or are they just in safe districts or they're going to get reelected?
I think most of them are in safe districts.
Okay.
Yeah, they have to be, or they wouldn't have been elected to begin with, because they were fringe from the get-go. They were QAnon and all this other silly stuff. So they must be in very safe districts.